Hi there, and welcome to another episode of this, whatever it is today. Happy end of February, the worst month of the year. Absolute worst. It is now the 28th, but I'm happy to see it scooting its ass out the door, away from me for another year. I hate February so much, but little bit of housekeeping. In case you are new here, my name is Summer Cannon. I am an award-winning horror writer, but more importantly for this channel, I am a horror fan. And on here, I like to talk about horror books that I've read and loved. We're only positive here. I'm not going to talk about the ones I didn't like because I'm not an asshole. I don't mean that. I think people who review books, good and bad, serve a very vital function to the book community at large. I'm not going to be one of them because some of these people are my peers. And also, I know what it's like to receive harsh reviews from peers. I'm not going to do that just because I don't want to put someone else in that position to have their feelings hurt by me. I don't want to do that. But the good news is, unlike January, which started off with a stinker, both the books that I finished in February were great. We can talk about them, and I'm very happy to do so today. Here we go. So the first book that I read and really liked was The Case Against Satan by Ray Russell. I picked this up at a bookstore. I saw it sitting on a table. I picked up the Penguin Classic version. The foreword was written by Laird Barron. And I didn't know what to expect. I'd never heard of this book. And I know some of the people watching this are going to be going, what? You've never heard of this book? No. This book was written even before my mom was born, so I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But I was so pleasantly surprised. This book is an exorcism book, and it predates William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist. And Laird Barron, in his foreword, praises this book for being so, it has a lot of word economy, he states. It's such a slimmed down thing. And it is. I don't know if I would even call this a short novel. It very well may be a novella. It is a short read. And maybe it's not dense with the words, but there was enough to it that it didn't feel Spartan in its writing. The storytelling didn't feel kind of skint. It was a very immersive story. The thing was, like, okay, if we're going to do comparisons, they're very different. It's very different from William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist, in that Regan MacNeil's exorcism takes longer, and it's more dramatic and more violent and more. It's more atmospheric than this book. The exorcism that takes place in this one is done sort of clandestinely. They do not seek permission from the higher-ups in the Catholic Church to perform this exorcism. The local bishop sort of, he sees the girl in question who, may or may, nobody thinks possessed. They think she is having some sort of crisis of faith, maybe, because she suddenly cannot enter the church. And they're thinking she's 16 years old. This is a girl just kind of being a brat. She's acting out. She's maybe having some sort of psychological issue, but nobody says possessed until the bishop, who just happens to be visiting the new parish priest, sees her, and he sort of diagnoses possession. And he goes to the new parish priest and he's like, we gotta take care of this. We don't have time to go through the regular channels to seek permission. We gotta do this, and we gotta do it now. And while this isn't a single day kind of exorcism, it does take multiple days. The story is deeper than that, because what has caused this girl's possession, and it is murky whether that is actually what's going on or not, kind of murky. It leans heavily on, this girl has been cursed, if you want to say, and it is lifted after a certain event takes place. I'm not going to spoil anything, you know how I am, but I thought this was a fantastic book, and I thought, so Ray Russell was the editor at Playboy magazine who was in charge of the stories that Playboy magazine would publish. Playboy magazine, back in the day, would publish short stories by the best male writers in the business. The best. Like, I've read stories by Stephen King and Chuck Palahniuk from Playboy after the fact that were fantastic. And there may be something to be said about there's a problem, especially back then, where in horror, they thought only men read it. They completely discounted the female audience, so they just published in Playboy magazine. Now, in my generation, when we got older, girls my age, back in the day, back in the early 2000s, were buying Playboy magazines because it had become something else. I don't know how to describe it, but the young girls of my generation also enjoyed looking at those women before we understood what a dichotomous monster Hugh Hefner was. You know, back in the day, he was celebrated as someone who celebrated women. He gave them jobs. He, you know, his secretary, Mary, was someone who'd worked with him for 40 years, I think. So there was a lot to be said about Hugh Hefner's a good guy. He's for the women. Then we learn more. But Ray Russell was the guy who was in charge of the stories, that the pieces of fiction that appeared in Playboy. And I knew this because I was kind of, a few years ago, kind of obsessively reading about what a dichotomous monster Hugh Hefner was. And Ray Russell's name came up a couple times because he was interviewed back in the day about women constantly going in and out of Hugh Hefner's office back in the day. And it was a different time. We're just, whew. But the backbone of this story is sexual in nature, and the way this girl acts out can be sexual in nature. And I was sort of clenched, worrying about how we were going to handle that, because this book is from the 60s. But I am so happy to say it was it wasn't exploitative in any way, and how this victim was treated. And it wasn't salacious, it wasn't overly descriptive when things would happen, and it was actually refreshing. And when you're going to kind of slim down certain details in writing, I'm glad that he skipped those, because it didn't feel sleazy. It felt tragic. It felt alarming what was happening to this girl, and in not going into detail describing her body or describing certain actions, you don't lose sight of that. You don't lose sight of, well, this is horrible, what's going on. And it made the read much more impactful as a sense of horror. So I definitely recommend that. The second book that I read and loved this month was The Etiquette of Booby Traps by John Boden. If you watch this channel, you know John Boden. I talk about him all the time. And this is a short story collection. A lot of these stories are older. Like, they go back to, like, I think the earliest one was 2010. These are previously published works. And I like John Boden's mind so much. I like where he goes so much. And there is sort of a sense of, maybe in the last 5-6 years especially, maybe a little bit longer, where he's really leaned into being John Boden. This is who I am. This is the kind of language that I use. And I love it because he's so different from everybody else. He's so literary, he's so smart, and he's so himself in how he describes things. Turn of phrase is so interesting in John Boden's writing. And in some of these older works, it's not like there was a crisis of personality going on. I don't mean that at all. But it did feel like there was more of a, this is horror, and we're going to make sure this fits into this box considering they were previously all published, you have to fit into a box to make it into certain anthologies. And he made it into a Borderlands anthology. That is bragging rights for life. If you're not in the business and you don't understand what a big deal it is to get into a Borderlands anthology, that's a huge deal. I loved all these stories, and they are very much John Boden stories, if not at full volume. That's what I mean. Not at full volume. The way he writes now is so unapologetically, this is me. And these stories, it's more like this is horror, if that makes sense. This is me writing horror versus this is me. And you have fun trying to pick out what genre this is. I'm not thinking about it. I'm just writing. That's one of the things that I really like about John Boden, because he's just who he is. Genre be damned. And I think that's so brave. I think that's so up yours. Stick this in your pipe and smoke it. And I'm impressed to see that he's always kind of had this talent for turn of phrase. Always. And I'm also impressed to see he has grown into something great. So I really enjoyed this collection, The Etiquette of Booby Traps. First of all, what a fantastic title. What a fantastic title. He has a talent, and always has, of pain. Of really, in so few words, detailing a character living in, drowning in pain. And it's such an experience to read that. And he's so good at it, always was good at it. And that talent for turn of phrase, always there, still there in this. And there's a lot of like surprisingly weird stuff. Because he is John Boden and writes genre be damned, you do run into things where it's like, how do you think of that? That's awesome. There was that in this too, where it's like, that's so weird. That's so creative. That's so out of the box, which you want to see. You want to see that, especially when we're talking about the indie scene, because you are not under the constraints of a big publisher who has a formula they want followed. So getting weird, that's the great thing about reading indie anything, but especially horror. It gets weird. It gets creative. It makes you kind of stop and go, what did I just read? And that's the best part of it. You're not expecting it. And John Boden is the best at making you go, whoa, what was that? So of course I recommend it. And yeah, that's the two things this month. Again, I'm so happy. Florida? February is the Florida of the year. So yeah, that makes sense. I've already started another book. It's a book that I picked up when I went to Point Pleasant last year to go see if I could find Mothman. And I am enjoying it. It's a book written by a local ghost hunter writer person. And it's good. I'm very much enjoying it. Like I said, this is what I grew up reading, books like this of local lore. And Point Pleasant is about 3 hours away from where I grew up in West Virginia. So it's not super local to me, but this book is talking about my stomping grounds. This book is talking about places I grew up. And I'm loving it, but there have been a couple of things that aren't racially sensitive. No malice to them, but it's like, oh, you can't say that. And so, but we'll talk about it. If I'm pretty sure I'll talk about it. That there's nothing in it that's making me go, this book is a piece of shit. It's absolutely not. There's just a couple little things, again, turn of phrase where it's like, ooh, you can't say that. Whoops. And that'll be it. That'll be it this month. March, for all intents and purposes, March is here. Spring is coming. I have my first author appearance in April that I'm very much looking forward to. It's at it's the next town over local library. I've done appearances there before. It's a great place. The person who organizes these events is a great person. and I really enjoy doing these. I'm gonna get out a little more this year and put my face out there and be like, I write books, pay attention to me, buy my books, because that's completely the normal and insane thing to do. So that'll be all. I want to thank you for always showing up for this nonsense and talking books with me, talking horror with me, and I hope the world is treating you well, better than it is some other people, and I'll see you next month. Bye.